Hi guys, welcome back. Welcome to the FSX404 channel. Today we're going to do an approach into the fourth most extreme airport according to the History Channel, the Princess Juliana Airport, TNCM. For the Princess Juliana approach, I chose to do the VOR runway 9 category C and D approach. The reason I chose this approach is because this approach involves timing our flight. And so far in our most extreme series, we haven't really timed our flights. So I just want all of you to be aware that in flying there's always that option that we have to time our flight. This approach also involves doing procedure turns, and we'll get deeper into this as we go on. So let's get into the Princess Juliana VOR 9 category C and D approach. First thing we always look at on the approach plate is the name of the approach itself. VOR runway 9 category C and D approach. Just by looking at the name of the approach, we can tell that there are no distances needed for this approach. If the approach was a VOR DME approach, then we would automatically know that there are distances in this approach. But because this is only a VOR approach, that means that the DME equipment, the distance measuring equipment, is not necessary for this approach. When we only have one VOR and no distances, the second tool that we use to do our approach is timing. Just as I said before, this approach involves timing. The second thing to notice on the name of this approach is it says category C and D. What is category C and D? Category C and D airplanes are all airplanes that have approach speeds of 121 knots or above, meaning that pretty much all the airliners. The next thing we'll look at on this approach plate is the IAF point, the initial approach fix. That's the point where our approach will begin. In this case, the IAF is the St. Martin VOR PJM 113.0. So no matter where we are coming from, we will first fly to the PJM VOR. We can also immediately notice that the IAF, the PJM VOR, has a solid or bold line racetrack or holding pattern attached to it. This solid racetrack means that upon reaching the IAF, the PJM VOR, the first thing we need to do is do a procedure turn. When it comes to briefing approach plates like we're doing right now, for approaches that we need to do procedure turns for, like this one, we're going to split the approach into two parts. The first part is going to be the procedure turn, and the second part of the approach will be the approach to land. When it comes to procedure turns, especially like the one at Princess Juliana, the pilots need to automatically know which procedure turn they need to do. This is something they learn during their instrument training. The only thing the approach plate will tell us is that we need to do the procedure turn. Which procedure turn we do depends on where we're coming from. I'm not going to go into detailed procedure turns during this approach briefing. I do have a very detailed procedure turn tutorial on how to do them and when to fly them. So if I'm going too fast and what I'm about to say about procedure turns does not make any sense, don't worry about it. There's a link in the description that will take you directly to the procedure turns tutorial where everything is explained slowly and it will make sense. The first thing we need to do for a procedure turn is we need to extend our inbound leg into infinity. Second, we'll draw a line that is perpendicular to the inbound line that is drawn right over the fix, in this case the IAF, the PJM VOR. Third thing we'll do is we'll rotate this perpendicular line counterclockwise 20 degrees. Because this is a left turn hold pattern, we need to rotate the perpendicular line 20 degrees counterclockwise. This is very important. For standard right holding patterns, we would rotate this line 20 degrees clockwise. But for left turn patterns like this one, we're going to rotate this perpendicular line 20 degrees counterclockwise. The last thing we will do is we'll put our new line headings, 308 for the inbound course and 018 and 198 for the 20 degree rotated perpendicular line. Now we have split the airspace into three areas. There are three types of procedure turns. There's a direct entry, there's a parallel entry, and there's a teardrop entry. And which one of those we do depends on where we're coming from. If we're coming from the big area or area 1, we're going to do a direct entry. If we're coming from the second biggest area or area 2, we're going to do a parallel entry. And if we're coming from the smallest area or area 3, we're going to do a teardrop entry. Now, why are we doing these procedure turns? The procedure turns will put us into a position to do the rest of the approach or the second part of the approach. Without these procedure turns coming from certain areas, we will not be able to establish ourselves on the second part of the approach in time. For that reason, we will do a procedure turn, which will put us in a position to do the second part of the approach easily. I'm not going to go into details on how to do every one of these procedure turns. For that, please go and watch my other tutorial, but I will do one procedure turn for this approach. Because I live in the United States, I will set up the airplane coming into Princess Juliana from the United States. So I will fly to the PJM VOR on a heading of 170 to the VOR. Because flying on a heading of 170 to the PJM VOR puts us in the Area 3, we will have to do a teardrop procedure turn. So we will arrive to PJM VOR on a heading of 170. Upon reaching the VOR, we will fly a heading that is 30 degrees offset from our outbound heading. Our outbound heading is a heading of 128, so our 30 degree offset heading will be a heading of 158. We will fly a heading of 158 for 2 minutes. Remember, for airliners, we will double our times from 1 to 2 minutes, and instead of doing standard rate turns, we will do half standard rate turns. So we're going to fly on a heading of 158 for 2 minutes. After flying on a heading of 158 for 2 minutes, we'll do a half standard rate turn to the left to intercept a heading of 308 to the PJM VOR. Because the winds are pushing us and our flying is not perfect, this turn may not exactly put us in alignment with a heading of 308 to the PJM VOR, but it will put us in a position to intercept a heading of 308 to the PJM VOR. So by the time our procedure turn is complete, we'll be flying a heading of 308 to the PJM VOR, and we'll be in a position to do the rest of the approach. Again, this is all information that pilots must know automatically. Now, once we have established ourselves on the heading of 308 to the PJM VOR, we will be in a good position to do the rest of the approach. The whole purpose of procedure turns is to put us in this position to do the second part of the approach. Now let us talk about altitudes we need to be at when we are doing the procedure turn. If we look at the profile, we can see that we need to reach the VOR at 3,500 feet and overfly the VOR at 3,500 feet. So we will do our procedure turn at 3,500 feet. But if we look at the profile carefully, we can see that at one point, while we're doing our procedure turn and flying back to the VOR on a heading of 308, we need to do a descent. So when do we start this descent? We will start this descent as soon as we're established on a heading of 308. Once we're inside the airplane, we'll go over it a little more. The only thing that will show us that we're established on a heading or radial to or from the VOR is our VOR gauge. So, once we're established on our heading of 308 to the PJM VOR, we'll begin a step-down descent to 2,600 feet. Once we reach 2,600 feet, we'll maintain 2,600 feet until we overfly the VOR. Now, once we reach the PJM VOR at 2,600 feet on a heading of 308, we are ready to do the second part of the approach. Once we overfly the PJM VOR on a heading of 308 and we establish ourselves on a radial of 308 from the PJM VOR, if we look below at the profile, we can see that we need to fly that radial of 308 from the PJM VOR for 1 minute and 45 seconds. Once we have flown on a radial of 308 from the PJM VOR for 1 minute and 45 seconds, we'll do a half standard rate turn to the left until we intercept a heading of 096 back to the PJM VOR. If we look at the profile, we can see that after overflying the VOR at 2,600 feet, we need to do a step-down descent to 1,500 feet. Once we reach 1,500 feet, we'll maintain 1,500 feet until we are established on a heading of 096 to the PJM VOR. This approach plate does not have a final approach fix, or the final approach fix is not noted. So we will put our landing gear down once we are established on a heading of 096 to the PJM VOR, our final approach heading. Once we are established on a heading of 096 to the PJM VOR, we'll do another step down descent to 1,040 feet. We'll maintain 1,040 feet until we intercept the glide slope lights of the runway 9. We will not descend below 1,040 feet unless we have either a runway or the runway lights in sight. If by the time we reach the VOR for the third time, we do not have the runway or the runway lights in sight, we will do a missed approach. One more quick thing to note is that the final approach track is 3 degrees offset from the center line, meaning that 096 heading to the VOR will not line us up 100% with the runway. So once we pick up the runway visually, we will disregard the VOR from that point and we will fly and land visually. As I mentioned before, for this approach, we'll set up the airplane a couple miles northwest of the PJM VOR on a heading of 170 to the PJM VOR. Then we'll overfly the PJM VOR, do the teardrop procedure turn, and then the rest of the approach. For this flight, we'll use the Wilco Airbus 321. So let's get ourselves in the airplane and let's fly the approach.